This computer.
Now I'll go extra fast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on travel insurance, demystifying travel insurance, with Sherry from Medjet and travel insurance company I love. And Laura, a travel insurance connoisseur and expert, is going to help answer all your questions. We're going to go through this presentation that they have put together for us, and then we're going to answer all your questions. And if you are stressed about missing anything, don't worry. This is recorded, and everyone will get a copy of it tomorrow, sent to them, as well as any resources that we have.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll send out a PDF as well because I'm going to click through it super fast now.
yeah, we're a little late to start because we had some hecklers. So if you're watching the recording of this and you're like, why is it so short? It was like, oh, we've been dealing with some hecklers. So, from there, I will let Sherry take it away.
All right. So I am the head of marketing at Medjet. It is not insurance, but a private air medical transport and security response program for travelers. Laura is a longtime travel insurance expert, spent at a bunch of different companies, run a bunch of different insurance desks. So she's an unbiased insurance expert that we've asked to jump on to answer everybody's questions in a very unbiased way. Demystifying travel protection. The best tip I ever got was think about every worst case scenario that you might face, every fear, and then make a plan for every single one of them. Um, Matt and Kirsten Addis have amazing tips on Nomadic Matt. These are always up and very solid. Research your destination. Learn the emergency numbers for your destination. It's not always 911. Follow the embassy at your destinations on Twitter. They've got great feed information about like where there might be a strike happening or a demonstration happening, or if, hotel workers or sanitation workers are expected to go on strike on certain days, which can be very important information. Leave a complete itinerary and copies of your passport at home with someone you trust. Trust your gut instincts. Don't stay places that you're not comfortable. Don't do things you're uncomfortable with. Check in at scheduled times, very important, with family and friends, and be diligent about keeping that schedule because if you just disappear, that should be an unusual event, not a norm. Watch your alcohol consumption and intake levels. Watch your drinks. Know your source. Secure hide valuables. Don't carry large amounts of cash. Keep valuables zipped up and close to your body. Use secure ATMs. We're big fans of the STEP program here at MedJet. It's a government program where you enroll your itinerary and it lets the US consulates or the Canadians have a very similar thing, but it lets the consulate in the area that you're traveling to know that you're in the area in case there's an emergency. They know you're there. They also have an amazing app called the Smart Traveler app where you can punch in your itinerary and all those feeds about strikes, demonstrations, which have been turning into riots everywhere, they'll all pop up and give you an alert. I use this app myself. I love it. And if you're traveling in a group or family, agree on an emergency regrouping location and create a disaster phone tree. Pack for health, that's prescription medication. We always advise people take an extra 50% to cover delays. Do not rely on refilling abroad. And then there's a number of things that we recommend, just a basic first aid kit. On the medication, do double check with your destination that the medication that you're coming in is illegal because sometimes over-the-counter stuff like Sudafed or Claritin D can be problematic. My faves to pack for security are carabiners. They're great for attaching your purse or your backpack to your body or your chair. I always take a doorstop. The cheap rubber ones work too, but at least you can block your door. And then these are great, these US data blockers. It prevents you from getting juice jack if you're forced to, charge in an unknown USB or USB-C port. The data prongs are disabled, so only the electricity comes through. So now that there's a whole bunch of safety tips, the biggest one I can tell you is buy travel insurance and consider membership in an air medical transport and security response program like, of course, MedJet. Um, we figured just to make everything as broad as possible, we're looking at like the top six travel emergencies that travel insurance can typically help you with. And this is courtesy of a report put out by Generali last year. Medical issues, 27% of travelers have reported medical issues. So the medical component of travel insurance is really important. Vehicle breakdowns were another huge issue, 22%. Lost or stolen belongings, 20%. Travel delays, 15%, probably more these days. Illness and and other emergencies back home, if you have to either cancel your trip or cut your trip short, travel insurance helps you with that. And then natural disaster. We've seen a couple of those lately, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, things like that. And then a lot of studies for a long time have shown that 3 out of 4 travelers worry about safety abroad. So we'll get a little bit into, what kind of coverage you can get for that. So number one was medical emergencies while traveling. Most experts recommend a minimum of $100,000 in travel medical coverage. And now I'm sure you've all been reading, some countries actually require travel medical coverage. Places like Antarctica, they've always required stuff, but now it's becoming mandatory in places. If you have pre-existing conditions, and Laura can talk more to this later, it's really important that you purchase your travel insurance within a specific window of time. Otherwise, and that includes like that $25 that you put down for a Viking cruise that might be 2 years from now. It also includes that $5.60 charge that the airline did for your frequent flyer ticket. Any money that you put down is counts, the first money onto those pre-existing condition waivers. Very important. Know this, you will most likely be required to pay the medical bills yourself and then file a claim for reimbursement. So be sure to keep copies of all bills and records of all payments. Also know that some facilities do not take credit cards anymore and may require cash payment up front prior to treatment, even in the ER. That's scary. And really think about how your family would handle that, like how you would, especially if you were incapacitated, how would you get that money to the local hospital that's asking for it? That's actually why we put a $60,000 emergency medical advance on our Medjet Horizon membership. We'd heard really bad stories, and that's really important that you understand how you're going to pay that. Medical emergencies.
I would
Now,
just
if it's
like to chime in on that. This actually happened to my friend in Mexico, like 6 months ago. He got hit by a car and while and then robbed. And so um, he got denied from this hospital because he couldn't pay and he had no ID on him. So um, they like sent him home because they didn't know, like, let's say they took care of him, they didn't know that they would ever get paid. And so um, this, a lot of hospitals do want cash, because if you're
up
just
front. Yeah.
yeah, if you're some random tourist, like they have no way of like getting paid should you just run off.
Enforcing that. And if they do treat you, sometimes they will physically block you from leaving the hospital until you do pay. So very important to understand how, who you could ask to handle that. Read as far as Now, if it's something that's really serious that requires medical evacuation, really important to understand your medevac benefits and how you would get moved home rather than expecting your family to come spend a month and a bunch of money to come be with you. Very important. Now, travel insurance, most travel insurance policies will only get you to the nearest adequate facility. So that's like the true emergency medevac that gets you to a hospital that's capable of treating you. Once you're there, they will only move you further if it's deemed medically necessary or that the first, like the hospital that you're in can't adequately treat you. That does not necessarily get you moved home, just get moved home. Once you've recovered to the fullest extent possible in the foreign country, in the foreign hospital, travel insurance will typically repatriate you via a commercial flight. And that's actually why 35 years ago, Medjet created Medjet to get people moved to a hospital at home, regardless of medical necessity, just because they wanted to be moved home instead of having everybody go there. So that's a very big difference between travel insurance, medevac benefits, and a program like, Medjet that you can join separately. Number two was rental cars, accidents, and breakdowns. Understand your travel insurance's car rental coverages before you rent. Does it cover rentals in the country you're renting in? I actually got caught out because I was relying on one of my credit card travel insurances that has car rental on it, and I got to Italy, and I found out that it doesn't work in Italy. It's like one of the few countries that they don't cover, and so I had to pick up a very expensive, rather than it being part of a separate standalone travel insurance policy that does work in Italy. I had to pick up one at the rental car counter, which you can imagine how much that one cost. Especially if you're so very important to understand where you're going and what's allowed. And then also what exactly it covers: collision, theft, tire and glass, liability, harm to others, things like that. Know what's included for roadside assistance, either by the insurance company, which some will do that, and how to contact those in emergency services. Now, something I always do is rent from a known company that has a lot of locations, especially if you're kind of going on a one-way trip. Because if you break down, you're definitely going to want to be able to replace that car. And, if it's a smaller company, they may not be able to do that in an expedient manner. Take pictures of the car and drive it around the lot. Turn left. I always turn left, turn right. Turn left while braking, turn right while braking. Just listen for any weird noises. Check the tires for nails and sidewall nicks. Don't leave the lot if there's even the slightest thing wrong with the car. Just get a new one. Lost luggage. That was number three. One piece of advice: don't check bags. The airlines are experiencing serious worker shortages, especially ground crew. If at all possible, don't check bags. It also, if your trip's interrupted, keeps you super lean. You are so much more likely to get rebooked if you have not checked bags. If you're just carry on only, they can like switch you a lot quicker. And it also, but if they do lose your bag, and Laura can go into this more later, you're entitled to reasonable and verifiable incidental expenses if your bag is delayed or, sorry, part of my screen is actually missing. And it also may not cover the full value. So really leave the expensive stuff home. Make a list before you go of everything in your bag and approximate values. If they do get lost permanently, they're only responsible for like $3,800 worth and $1,800 internationally. And even if your renters or your homeowners may cover some of that, it probably isn't going to cover the full cost of electronics and jewelry, and probably needs to be additionally insured. So really leave it all home. Or make sure that it's like super duper insured. Stolen belongings. Now this is passports, credit cards, and cash. Travel insurance can assist you, helping with the costs and the logistics of replacing your documents, providing emergency emergency funds, things like that. Also, the local embassy can help you a lot in obviously replacing the passport, sometimes with cash, and your credit cards immediately report it, but always keep a backup card, at least one cash card and a credit card and a small amount of cash separate from anything that you carry. And again, for stolen bags, really important, always report the loss at the local police station, because you'll need a police report if you end up needing to file an insurance claim or a fraud claim with your credit cards. Travel delays. Laura pointed out to me yesterday that, some policies require a minimum delay of 3 to 5 hours for any benefits to kick in. So it's not like if your flight is delayed, you can say like, oh, I'm going to get off and have get a different flight and have travel insurance reimburse me for it. There is a very specific window before which your benefits will kick in. So watch out for that. I tend to just go book the next flight, but you got to eat the loss. Find out why the flight was canceled, because this determines whether it's the responsibility of the airline to reimburse you for things or give you credits, or what travel insurance will actually cover. Non-airline controlled ground things like weather, that's travel insurance. Things like staffing issues, maintenance issues, crew issues, that would be the airlines. So you're looking at two different types of people, or two different types of entities to help you with those inconveniences and costs. This is just rebooking scramble tips. I do the triple: stand in the airport line, get on the app, and call the airline simultaneously. And the number one recommendation I can tell you when you're dealing with a delay and trying to rebook your flights is be nice, be insistent, but be nice. Like, they're much more inclined to help you if you're just calm and nice and not screaming at them, because they feel bad too. A little defensive of my airline people. Number 5, emergency back home. Now that is trip cancellation if it's a pre-departure emergency and you have to cancel the trip. Now, if you have a lot invested in your trip, especially a lot of non-refundable penalty costs like cruises and tours that may have steep, cancellation penalties. Trip cancellation coverage gets you a large chunk of that money back. That is what it's for. The most important thing to understand in any policy is the list of covered events, the reasons your insurer will accept for canceling a trip. Those are all very specific, as Laura likes to point out, and they have very strict guidelines. If it's not a quote unquote covered event, then you can't cancel. Now, there is cancel for any reason insurance, which does give more leniency to the reasons by which you can cancel, but it's also more expensive. And Laura, you're still not going to get 100% of your money back with that either, are you? Yeah, no,
No.
shaking my head.
No.
Keep in mind that not all your losses will be reimbursed. If an airline issues you a voucher or a credit, that's kind of a refund, and so that wouldn't be reimbursed by travel insurance. Cruise voucher, things like that. Even with CFAR, the recoupment on what you've lost may only be 50 to 60% is the correct number, right?
Right. It's like 60 to 75%.
Okay. Overall, though, if it's a credit on average, I think you end up with about 50 to 60. Some of that
Right.
from insurance and some of that. All right, I can fix that one before we post it. Emergency back home while during your trip. That is trip interruption coverage, and that can reimburse you. That, just like cancel insurance, has specific reasons for which you can cancel. And Laura hit me to this one, which is interruption for any reason, which is a little bit lesser known than CFAR, but it does exist, and it broadens the reasons that are allowed for you to decide to go home and interrupt your trip. Natural disaster. Travel insurance plus programs like Medjet Horizon can help you with that. Best things that you can do is stay informed and connected. This is why we recommend following the consulates and downloading the Smart Traveler app. Monitor what's going on in it, and check in with your phone tree. Keep your phones and devices and batteries full at all times, because you just never know. Don't let everything run down at the same time and then you're caught out in an emergency. The airline, the local embassy, your insurance company, and programs like Medjet Horizon can help you. Have all those numbers pre-programmed into your phone. And then when in doubt, get out. If you do choose to cut your trip short, keep copies of any of the warnings, especially any government issued warnings, to, like people should leave or you may want to consider leaving, because that'll help you when you file your trip interruption Or if it, all this stuff is happening prior to departure, it'll help with your trip cancellation claims. Document, right, Laura?
Yes.
Other safety and security threats. This speaks to the 3 out of 4 people are concerned with. So just know who to call. This is a brief rundown of who can help you do what, which is the embassy. The embassy can help citizens in a major crisis, such as natural disaster, civil unrest. That's why it's good for them to know that you're in the area through the STEP program. They can also assist you if you get robbed or assaulted by contacting family members, connecting you to resources, and updating you on the status of your. I would call it a suit, but it's not, of your complaint and process. If you are arrested, ask the authorities to notify the embassy as soon as possible. They can do a jail visit. They can advise you on, the local criminal justice process, and recommend some local attorneys. Your insurance carrier, that can help you find flights out in the instance of a natural disaster or civil unrest. They can assist you. We already did that with lost and stolen passports and credit cards. Keep in mind that if any similar event, natural disaster, terrorism, unrest, has happened within the last 30 days of within 30 days of purchasing your policy, they consider it a known risk, and it may not be covered for trip interruption or and evacuation assistance. Laura can speak to that a little bit later as well, because people always have a lot of questions about that. Keep in mind that many things may not be covered if they're not specifically named or are specifically excluded. That's activities, sometimes we've heard of people getting in moped accidents. They didn't even think about it, but the insurance company may consider that a motorcycle, which is specifically denied. We had a woman who, it's actually a testimonial on our website, and she had gone to Vietnam and was in one of those little sidecar things that was excursion that was arranged by the hotel. And they flipped over. She landed face down in a rice paddy, goes to the hospital. She ended up being okay, wasn't going to make a claim, but she did call her insurance company, and just to find out sort of like what her benefits are. And they're like, well, you were on a motorcycle. And she says, no, there was a rear axle, but they insisted that they wouldn't have covered anything anyways. She subsequently came home and researched other, like the travel insurance, and signed up for Medjet, which we ended up transporting her the first trip she took after that, because she slipped and fell at the pyramids in Giza. Landed in a hospital full of cats, but that's a story for another time. They're using the cats as rodent control, and her husband was super freaked out. So Medjet Horizon, that's our security and crisis response membership. All of our memberships provide air medical transport to a home hospital. Medjet Horizon adds 24/7 security and crisis response for if you're the victim of a violent crime. If you just disappear, it gives your family somebody to call. Acts of terrorism, political threat, that includes like riots and things like that. Kidnap for ransom, blackmail and extortion, we had natural disaster. We added pandemic benefits right before the pandemic. We had so many people, not funny. We had so many people stuck all over the world when the airspace shut down, and it was all like wellness checks, and that was a lot. But they were eternally grateful that it was the security people that were dealing with, how to get them out, because there was so much confusion between the embassies, the airports, the airlines, and that can help. It covers wrongful detention and hijacking. So just scary stuff. You can call, the advantage of this over any of the security things that are in insurance is that you can call anytime you don't feel safe, and they will, either find you a path to safety or can include security extraction if that's what's necessary. And it also has that $60,000 emergency medical cash advance to potentially solve that upfront payment issue. It's the only spiel I'll do about Medjet. Okay, so common travel protection mistakes. Laura and I went over this list, and it's so obvious. It's not buying insurance, um, not buying enough insurance. Again, we all recommend at least $100,000 worth of the medical component. The rest of it is really where are you going? What are you doing? How much is your trip costing that you may lose? Um, and are you taking expensive stuff with you? The rest of it is just the medical stuff is really important to make sure that it covers at least $100,000 worth. Not purchasing it within the pre-existing condition window, which is typically that 10 to 14 days after the first deposit. This is the big one, not thoroughly reading the policy. If it's not what you want or what you need, you do have a limited window to cancel and have it refunded, and then, find a policy that's better for you. It's very important to understand what specifically excluded activities, valuables, modes of transportation, and things like that. And for us, it's important that people understand the medevac benefits, that those are only, I mean, it's in all of the descriptions of it, to the nearest adequate facility, not to a hospital at home. That's why Medjet exists. So that was fast. Matt made up for some artistic time. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back to Matt and Laura primarily for Q&A, because everybody always has tons of questions for her.
Yeah. Well, everyone, round of applause for Sherry for this. Fast, but also very detailed too. So we did make it. I know because we started late, we technically only have 13 minutes left, but we will, if Laura can stay, if you guys can stay a few extra minutes, I can stay a few extra minutes, and we will answer questions. So if you type in your question in the chat, I will read it, and then we'll let the experts handle the questions. Okay, so I'm starting off with Michael. Is it more cost effective to purchase cancellation insurance from a cruise line airline per trip, or purchase an annual policy that has a set dollar amount of coverage per term? I'm supposed to be on a cruise right now, but I had appendicitis right before the cruise and prevented me from going. Unfortunately, I did not have cancellation insurance. What should I purchase for the future?
You would want to purchase a policy that does have cancellation because that's for the unforeseen, is really what you're purchasing the insurance for. So that if that happened, you would be able to file a claim if it was a medical reason that you had to cancel. You would be able to file for what your loss was with the cruise line. We always say that 71% of cruise travelers purchase insurance, but they usually purchase the cruise insurance. And it is much better to purchase a third party because it is primary coverage, where the cruise line sometimes is secondary coverage. And that's a big thing you want to look at your policy so that you're not having to file with your personal insurance prior to filing for your travel insurance. So you want to have a policy that states it's a primary coverage for your medical and all of your cancellations.
Now,
I'll also note that I got caught out because I took a cruise in April, and for one of the travelers, I have an annual policy, and then there was other stuff that I knew that my card would cover, as far as the other two tickets. But one person, they did the cruise insurance, and that at the time seemed like the right thing for them to do. But we had booked um, 3 extra days in Budapest and then 4 extra days in Prague on the end. And I discovered that even though the travel dates were correct that we put in, that actually wasn't, those extra days weren't covered by the policy that we'd purchased from the cruise line. And I ended up purchasing her a completely separate third party just because of those extra days. So there's, in some ways, they're not bad, right? In some ways they can be good. It's just everybody's doing something different. So be really clear on what it does and more importantly, what it doesn't cover.
Right. Sometimes the cruise lines will only insure while you're on the ship. So if you have excursions off of that ship and you get injured, then their policy would not cover you. That's why we always say a third party, because it is door to door with a third party. It's when you leave home to when you come back home that you have coverage.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I'm looking at, I'm concerned about underwriting, and all that kind of stuff. Like we don't, if we transport somebody, we don't subrogate. When you talk about sort of like first party and second party, that just means that somebody's going to go with their hand out looking for something from anywhere, that you may be covered elsewhere. And, some of the credit card insurance, especially for the car rental, really look at whether it's first party insurance or whether it's second party insurance, because there's a whole mess of like subrogation that goes on. We don't do that. We're just a private program. If we transport somebody, there's no claim. We pay for everything, and it's underwritten by Lloyd's of London. But we'll never go to an insurance company for money back. And that's kind of the differences between first, second, and independent.
Um, and then just the second part of Michael's question is,
Hmm.
do you recommend a per trip or per annual policy? I always tell people that, like, listen, if you're going away all the time, it's just get an annual policy. It's a little bit easier. But if you take like one, two trips a year, like just get it per trip. Whereas me, like I'm always on the road, so I just buy annual policies.
Yeah, the annual policy has limitations on the amount that it covers, is what I like to share with people. So if you are going on a very expensive trip, you may want to look at adding a policy just for that particular trip. The annual trip has, I'm just going to say, I think the maximum that you can purchase is 15,000 for cancellation, and that is for the year. So if you had a trip that you canceled and you used half of it, then you only have half of it left for the remaining of the year. So it's a set amount that you get for all of your travels. And it may run out or it may stay in place, but I just like to point that out. I usually say that people that travel a lot, that annual is great for the medical because it's there for you the whole time, but it may not cover all of your cancellation cost.
Great. Jim asked best insurance for over 70-year-olds.
And that's a tough one. It is because that's when the price really does go up. I usually just say that you have to kind of compare policies of really the pricing on them. But most of them, that 70-year-old is, and I know that's why a lot of people go with cruise line insurance because it's not an age rated, that it is it's a custom product. So they don't have like 0 to 25 or 25 to 35. They do not look at the ages of the individuals. So I understand that that's why a lot of people do that. But I usually say if you're doing the cruise line insurance, you may want to just take out a separate medical, which is a coverage that's very inexpensive, so that you would definitely have primary coverage while you're traveling.
Um, in terms of like recommended companies, Medjet. Um, but you can also use sort of more like other
Yeah, I mean, there's many options out there anymore. You know, it used to be just maybe two or three companies, but you probably have 25 travel insurance companies now, you know, that you have options to purchase from. Some of them may vary, but they all usually have that rate program within them, you know, 70 to 75, 76 to 80, and that's where they do get very costly because of the age of the individual. But that's usually what I say is If you don't want to, if you're don't want to pay that for cancellation, then purchase the medical only and purchase your Medjet membership. And you get to have medical coverage. If anything does go wrong, you would be taken care of medically.
Right. For clarity, like we don't pay hospital bills. We are just in charge of getting people moved from the hospital that they're in to their hospital at home so that they can get back into their home health care, which typically has much higher limits, not just the comfort of being treated, at your home hospital, but you get back into your home health care.
Um, Lots of questions here related to Medjet that we can get to in a moment, but I want to answer Sue's questions about medical coverage with credit cards.
Mm.
Uh, you know, you read these like Chase Sapphire Reserve and the Amex and all that stuff, and it's like, oh, they got great medical coverage, but they are banks. They are not insurance companies, and I think they fall into more of that like that's not their main thing. And while I have not personally used them, I've had other travel writers had to claim medical coverage expenses from them, and they've said the process is slow, it's cumbersome. They have to fight a lot more than if you just had like a travel insurance company who's like, you get to, something happens in the hospital, here's the bill, because like that's their main business.
Right.
JP Morgan Chase's main business with their Chase Sapphire card is to make money on you spending the card. So even though I have all these fancy cards, I still buy like annual travel insurance policy because like that's primary coverage. It's like the thing the company does. They know it. It was just easier.
Me
Right.
too.
And a lot of times on those credit cards, sometimes some of them only cover the card holder. They don't necessarily cover the family members that are traveling with them. And I just ran into one recently that American Express did not offer medical for people on this one particular card this lady had. For her, she was over 65 and they didn't cover any medical coverage. So if you're doing credit card, you really do need to do a deep dive into what that. And I'm with you, Matt, that they're really not an insurance company. They're really a bank that their money is in your credit card, what how you spend money.
Yeah, I rely on them only because I have three cards with coverages, and I only rely on my cards for the trip interruption, trip cancellation, sort of like the smaller expenses within the limit, and always take out a medical policy.
Yeah. They like car insurance is, great. Amex Platinum, car insurance, these higher end cards. Car insurance is good. And the trip stuff that you book on the card, they'll be fine. I mean, one thing people don't know is, they also cover purchase protection. So let's say you go buy a Mac and it breaks, you can get that money back from the cards. These higher end cards do have a lot of like cool things, but they're not there for the medical stuff.
No.
Um, so there's been a lot of questions about Medjet and annual policy versus trip policy. Um, and so let's just sort of roll that all into one and kind of just let Sherry just talk about Medjet for a moment.
Yeah, again, it's the main service is hospital medical transport. I work here, I have it. I'd still take out the medical component of travel insurance because we don't pay hospital bills. Um, and then if you have the security and crisis response, that's a whole other, game of what you're afraid of and what you feel like you might need help for. Most people are annual. If you take two trips a year or more, then you're much better off with an annual membership. It does come in 8-day, 15-day, 21-day, and 30-day short term. If you're only taking one trip, then that's the 8-day starts at $99 and for an individual, and I think 198 for a family. Uh, So it's difficult, you know, it really depends on what kind of a traveler you are. I already answered one of the questions about underwriting. And what else would somebody want to know
It seems it
about
was
that? I did see like one person who's an annual Medjet member, and do they also need travel insurance? Again, you know, I take out the travel insurance. I rely on my credit cards for anything that is reimbursement related, and have an annual policy. I always take out at least the medical component of travel insurance, even if that's just, you know, entering $500 as the cost of my trip, which helps keep the medical component of it, or the cost of the policy itself, you know, pretty low. Uh, but yeah, you definitely need both. They're very different types of services. Travel insurance is the cake of your coverage, and MedJet's like the icing and the sprinkles. We get you moved home because insurance won't.
uh, is there an age limit on Medjet?
Is what?
The question is, what's
Age
the
limit.
age limit?
Oh, no. No. Under age 75, you can just you sign up. There's no pre-existing condition exclusions. There's no health questions. We don't ask, you don't tell. Anybody can sign up. Over age 75 is our diamond membership, in which case you will get a questionnaire. There's about 6 medical questions on it. We just like to know, you know, if there's anything major on people over age 75. That goes from 75 to 84. Same process for 85 plus, which is our platinum membership. And as you can imagine, the cost goes up a little bit each tier. But no, I mean, we have, I think our oldest member might be 102, but don't quote me on that.
Okay, so just let me scroll back up. People writing. I want to make sure I get everybody. Um, mhm, mhm.
Be good to know who is.
I think we just covered that. We just covered that. Um, what insurance companies do I use? Recommend, Matt? Well, I recommend a bunch. They're all on the website. Uh, there's a whole tab on it, but I have Medjet, for the evac. I think, as Sherry said, it's about getting you home, and a lot of other regular travel insurance companies don't really get you home. They're really, again, they're meant to, like, if I get sick and I need surgery, they're there. And then it's like, good luck. Whereas so MedJet comes in handy for that. And then I also use Safety Wing as a company that has like a more like a digital nomad. Like, now that I'm moving overseas, I use them as sort of like my it's like US health insurance, but globally. But there's a lot of companies that offer that, the
Yeah.
same data
There's
that.
a really good question in here too, which is there a place where you can compare and contrast travel insurance, you know, travel insurance policies? That answer is yes. I personally, if I'm buying it for, if I'm buying, you know, insurance for a friend of mine, which I'm not an insurance expert and Medjet's not insurance, but they all call me. There's 3 sites that we love and refer people to. One is travelinsurance.com. Another one is insuremytrip.com. And another one is squaremouth.com. All of those, they've already pre-vetted the top policies, the top companies in all 50 states because insurance is regulated state by state. So what might be great for somebody in New York might really be terrible for somebody in Kansas. Very, very complicated. But what they'll do is it's a query-based system. You punch in where are you going, how old you are, how many days are you going to be gone, what kinds of coverages do you want? You know, are you taking a tour or a cruise that's got a steep cancellation penalty, or are you kind of winging it and there's really not that many expenses that you're concerned about, or that you don't feel like you're not going to get your money back, so you can insure a lower amount? You put in how much medical you want, and it'll show you all sorts of policies from the the companies that they feel are the best companies. I bought a bunch of policies on all three of those websites, and their comparison tools are great. Insure My Trip, if you have questions, does have a really robust phone center that you can call and talk to real human beings. It's very important. It's very important to me, which is why I'm like, no phone trees at Medjet, you know. You'll always get a human. But Insure My Trip, they have a really great phone like a phone center as well. So feel free to call them with questions.
And Sure My Trip is a company that we recommend often on the site. It's a we, I say and so like, they've done webinars here in the past. Like
Yeah.
they're great people. So I speak highly of them too. Um, let's
One
see.
thing that I wanted to share with on the medical, there are some companies that will pay your hospital bill, will guarantee payment to your hospital bill, so you don't have to put it on your credit card. So those are just things to look at if that's
Mhm.
something that you don't want to be out of that money yourself, that the insurance carrier will guarantee payment to the hospital. And it's paperwork that has to be sent over to them and they sign off on it. But that is something that is important, that if somebody is concerned about what the cost is going to be, to look at that in a policy. And then one other thing, Sherry, that I wanted to say on terrorism, that event has to occur within 30 days of your travel dates.
Right.
So that if it happened 45 days ago and you're now leaving on your trip, that's not a reason to cancel. It has to be within 30-day window.
Okay. Question on the direct payment to the hospitals. Are there particular countries or hospitals that don't want to deal with insurance? Is their ability to pay affected by whether the hospital itself will take it or not?
Yeah, I think that what they really look at is where they're taking them. If they're having to be evacuated, that they will take them to a facility that accepts their payments.
Got it. Okay. Interesting.
Um,
And the
Greg,
other thing that I wanted to add on, just one other thing, because I know you have a lot of adventure travel within your travels, is always look at if that policy has an add-on for an adventure pack. Whereas if you're doing extreme sports, then if you get injured on that extreme sport, you would have coverage for that.
yeah, and that's one thing to look out for because a lot of default policies sort of don't have like what would be considered an extreme sport, say like skydiving or
Right.
scuba diving as set
Yeah.
coverage, right? The other
Sadly, we don't
question,
have any of those exclusions. The double hang gliding accident, that was a whopper last year.
um, Gregory has a question about, transmissible viruses and having to isolate. Um, you know, how much of that expense can be covered? How difficult is to stay uh, accommodation if you fall ill? One thing I would say post-COVID is that there are more and more travel companies that do cover, ice, like if you get stuck and you have to be isolated, a li- a certain amount of accommodation cost coverage. It's not great, like not putting you up in the Four Seasons, but a number of policies, and one thing I hope you've taken away from this is always read your policy because every policy is different. Um, but depending on the policy, you can get some money to cover accommodation should you be stuck and required to, say, isolate and, you know, be in one place before you can go home.
Right. And
Right.
Matt, the other thing that they do is if you are quarantined, that and you had prepaid tours, that you can file that as a loss because you weren't able to participate due to being quarantined.
Yeah. So again, it all comes down to read your policy.
Right.
So Sherry mentioned this in her talk, but when I get emails uh, of people complaining about travel insurance and them being denied a claim or whatever, I'm like, well, did you read your policy? And oftentimes the answer is no, but there's just sort of an assumption that I bought travel insurance and so it covers everything. I mean, I learned that. And I guess, when you think about it, this really makes sense, is that cruise coverage will only cover you on the boat, which, but you would think if you're buying a trip, it's going to cover all aspects of the trip. But, travel insurance is still an insurance company, and insurance companies will do whatever they can to find the loopholes. So, um, definitely one thing to think about. And somebody asked about buying airline coverage, like um, the airline insurance. I also don't buy that policy either because they're only going to cover you for that portion of it, and you really just want a travel insurance policy that covers all aspects of your trip from a primary source who's an airline is not a travel insurance company, right? And so just always buy direct. They're using you as an upsell, and usually there's a better policy out there.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, but like all of those, if you purchase it on Expedia or you click the button on, the airline portal or the cruise portal, they're all underwritten by large insurance companies that also sell consumer policies that you can customize to yourself.
Right.
So,
Yeah, you definitely, just kind of, I always say, review your policy. Like Sherry mentioned earlier, you have like a 10 to 14 day look at the policy. And you would, if it's not something that's going to meet your needs, they would do a complete refund for what you paid for that insurance. So, you have time. You don't have to have everything there, but you really want to have some key things that's interested in what you're wanting covered.
right.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I'm
mean,
going to
I fly Delta all the time, and they partner with Allianz. And it's like if you really just want an Allianz policy, just go direct to Allianz, right? Um, there's no reason to buy it through Delta. It's sort of like when you buy airfare through Expedia, you're getting like the cheapest bucket ticket, right? So you kind of
with the most restrictions.
yeah, so your that policy is, not probably going to be less generous is my assumption. Um, One thing I would say, this is a good question from Kathy.
Yeah.
Um, is it too late to get travel insurance for a trip I made a deposit on a month ago?
You can always purchase it. What you're not going to receive is that pre-existing medical waiver. That's what's tied into that purchase within 14 to 21 days of your initial deposit. But your policy would still be in place. You just wouldn't have, they would look back in your medical history. Whereas if you purchase it within that 10 to 14 days, they don't look back in your medical history. But yes, you can purchase it, uh, you know, 30 days, 40 days after but you're negating some of the benefits of the policy, but it has mainly to do with the pre-existing waiver.
Right. And somebody asked the same question about purchasing Medjet. We don't have that because we're not insurance. So you can sign up at any point prior to departure from your residence as listed on the account. We've had people signing up from their driveway as they're pulling out to go to the airport because the husband thought the wife did it, the wife thought the husband did it, and they're like all freaked out. But as long as you're under age 75, you can sign up for it right before you leave for the airport, and it does not affect our coverage of pre-existing conditions. We don't have those exclusions or adventure travel exclusions.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up since it's 7:15, but I will say one final thing is that, on this subject, it is always good to buy your policy as soon as possible when you start planning a trip because, let's say you're going somewhere and a storm's coming. You're like, oh, I got to get travel insurance. It's already too late, because um, insurance covers anything that has like hasn't happened yet, in the sense that it's like if you can't, so many people buy it because like, oh, there's a hurricane coming and I might be affected. The second something has been announced, it's not covered.
Known risk.
Yeah, it becomes a known risk. So if you've already booked something and you're like, I'm going to buy the policy. Thank you, Sherry and Laura, for doing this wonderful talk. I know we started a little bit late. We had some technical
We got some
difficulties
fancy art classes.
that people who are watching this after the fact won't know about, but let's just say that, it's always interesting on the internet. So again, tomorrow you will get a copy of this presentation sent to you via email along with the resources mentioned in this chat. And so, yeah, and if you have any questions, just shoot me an email, nomadic.com, nomadicmath.com. And Sherry and Laura, thank you so much. Virtual round of applause. And everyone, have a wonderful, great night and or day wherever it is you are in the world.
All right. Thanks for showing up, everybody.
Thanks.